Okay. All right. So October 2025, FAC. Um, and let's get started. So let's begin by um, approval of the minutes. Apparently, I have that before the agenda. Haha. Let's approve the agenda. You all have the meeting link.
Colina, the link
It
that I had,
is agenda, minutes, chairs reports, debit and credit card payment policy. I don't think I got a good enough answer for that, but anyway.
link
CSU resolution on gender affirming care. Should we strike that, Brendan?
Colina, when I did the
Oh
link to
no,
the
hold on. My
agenda,
speaker's still not working. Hold on. I'll fix it. 1 second. Okay, I'm good now. Go ahead, Brendan. Sorry.
Mike was had something to say, I think, too. So
Colina, I was just trying to say when I got to the link, it didn't take me to our agenda. It took me to BOR. Is that?
Sorry, I did that actually on purpose because I think folks don't always know where to find it. And I wanted to make sure people knew where to find that always. So
Okay.
instead of taking folks to the PDF, which is just isolated and you can't navigate, it took you to the BOR meeting and agendas. Yes. So I apologize for that.
Our agenda is under the agenda on there.
Yes,
Oh,
FAC
sorry.
agenda.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just understand that. Okay, thanks.
Yes. Yeah, and it's the most reliable way if I'm late in getting it to you to make sure you can get it always. So I just wanted to make sure we all knew that. Mark, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Brendan, did you say we should strike number 5?
yeah, I think that's probably okay.
Okay, so with that modification, Mark, is that your
Yes.
motion? Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it, Matt.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any
Aye.
opposed? All right, here we go. Okay, so the minutes of September 5th, right? Let's get that.
I think Mark has
Open.
his hand up, Colina.
Pardon?
Mark has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm searching for a document. Go ahead, Mark.
Lena, I'm listed as neither present or absent, so it's as if I don't exist.
That's kind of fun.
But yes, indeed, I was actually absent.
Okay. All right, so we need to add Mark is absent, and I believe we need to add Thomas, am I gonna get Barron? From Charter Oak as present. He was new that time. And Linda Wilder we can remove because Thomas was replacing Linda Wilder. And
I move to approve the minutes with those modifications.
okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstained because I wasn't here.
And you existed. Yes.
I
thank you.
moved it, but I wasn't actually there and I don't exist.
Thank you.
Same here. I abstain, Kalina. John.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Chairs reports. What do you have, Brendan?
I just wanted to walk through a few things related to the CSUs. The first is, I think, some numbers that the system office called for from campus management, but I'm not sure faculty were really part of that call or necessarily saw the results of that call. So although I think the faculty have seen it now, but let me just see if I can share my screen here. Give me one moment. Yeah. Okay. And the first, so this data call, is a call that, I would agree with in the sense that someone in the system office said, hey, what is this this new federal budget, OBBB? What does it mean for the CSUs? Going into the next federal fiscal year. So campus management answered the call with these numbers. And, you can see that essentially this bill, not to get down into the weeds, but essentially has in my opinion, has a larger impact on graduate programs than undergraduate programs. But the estimated losses on each campus to the students, and I want to say a little bit about that, but the estimated loss of financial support from these federal programs to Central was around 9.4 million estimated. This is annual. ECSU, just a little over 500,000, Southern, roughly 10 million, and Western 3.3 million. There's a few things to be a little bit careful with when it comes to these numbers, because from my understanding, there's basically no modeling of the behavioral response. In other words, like if students just decide not to come, then the institutional loss of money will be greater than this, right? It's particularly if students are, have a large reaction, or if the this federal bill is is institutionally a challenge to our state universities.
At least for me, you froze there for a moment, Brendan. Could you
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I back
repeat the
now?
last 30 seconds, maybe?
Okay. Am I back now?
Yeah, you are
Yes.
now.
Okay. I apologize for that. So, I mean, the punchline here is that this new federal bill is going to be a challenge to our state universities. And there's some hope that potentially in the special session, we could get some help with when it comes to this. Our students could get some additional support, but the volume of need that's going to sort of precipitate from the federal budget, and we're not even talking about what's happening as a consequence of the shutdown, but the need in our state is going to be a significant magnitude larger than what we're talking about right here. So real challenges for the state budget and for our campuses coming. And it's just very difficult to wrap your head around it. Now we also did get, I'm kind of cheating also the system office.
Brendan?
Yep.
Before you go on to this, I just wanted to mention, we've been talking about that a lot at Central, specifically because I'm part of the Doctor of Nurse Anesthesia program, and it's really going to potentially impact that because, I mean, that's a program that's for 3 years. It costs the students $120,000, which is a bargain compared to Quinnipiac's program of a few years ago and some of the other programs around. But nonetheless, the students, pretty much max out their student loans as it is in order to survive for 3 years. And so that's going to have a serious impact on the enrollment for that. And the problem is we contribute a huge percentage of the nurse anesthetists for the state. So, I mean, the whole thing, this is a major workforce issue that, right now we're bringing in 33 doctoral students every year. And so we have 99 doctoral students. And so it's scary. if that gets cut out. And every time I go to a hospital for either myself or someone else, it's one of my former students that's the anesthetist. And that just kind of shows how common they are. It's about half the anesthetists in the state have come through our program. So it could have a real impact. I just wonder, doesn't seem like the state's really, while they keep constantly pushing workforce development. But of course, it's not the state's problem. This is the federal problem. But hopefully there can be some way to address that at the state level.
Yeah,
That's my
thank
spill.
you. Yeah, thank you, Mark. No, I think that's really important. I mean, what can get lost in these numbers and this money is the impact on the education of the next generation, the impact on the healthcare system in our state. There's a lot at stake here, and we've gone through many years of plowing billions and billions of dollars into rainy day funds and Wall Street. And it seems like it's raining pretty hard right now, and it's not clear to me that you should continue doing that in these circumstances. But I think a lot of people are, talking about that particular issue. So, yeah. So these are actually not. These are not numbers I prepared, but these are numbers that will be presented at the Finance Committee meeting coming up. The BOR's Finance Committee. I'm not going to go through this in great detail. But what you can see here is that the amount of reserves that the system office had been holding on to when it comes to the CSUs was somewhere around $129 million, and rightfully there have been questions asked about why the system office is holding on to this large pool of money. And I think what they're going to talk about at the Finance Committee meeting is plans to spend that money. Some are already approved, which are on the right-hand column there under the blue header, around $53 million. And on the left-hand column, there's some new proposed uses of the system office reserves totaling around 37 million. And so that's a pretty large drawdown of the system office reserves in total, right? Going from 129 to $39 million in system office reserves. And, at a certain level, it kind of makes sense that one would do this because, again, it's not clear why that large pool of cash is being held at a distance from our students. But I just giving a little bit of a preview of what the Finance Committee is going to talk about, and then down the road what the BOR itself will presumably talk about. Continuing with that.
Can I just ask you something, Brendan?
Sure.
Just what's that UNP stand for?
UNP is that's an accounting term. It means unrestricted net position. That's
okay, because one says undesignated used and the other says designated. So how can it be designated and undesignated if it's a UNP? You know what I mean? It says undesignated UNP used for one, that's 37 million. And then designated UNP used is 53 million. So how can it be designated and undesignated at the same time?
So they used to use that term restricted reserves and unrestricted reserves.
Okay.
And so they've sort of changed language here to designated UNP, which in the other language is restricted reserves, and then undesignated UNP, which is unrestricted reserves.
Okay. Are they telling us that the 37 versus the 53 do we know how one of them is being used? One is undesignated and the other is or are they just giving, it looks like the first column, they're just giving them back to the schools, And the second column, what are they doing with it, 53?
Yeah, so I don't know. Well, the 53 is so-called debt relief. That's
For
uh,
whom? For the students or for the universities?
for the university. So
Okay.
historically, the way I've viewed the system office is that they're basically like a tax collector. So they vacuum up debt payments from the campuses and then they forward those payments to Chifa. And what they're saying is that they're gonna forward reserves to Chifa
Instead of
uh,
collecting the money first.
right, right.
Okay,
So
thanks.
so that's relief to the campuses, which
Yes.
hopefully somehow will benefit students. And then the others, I'm not sure. Those are new um, items, and I'm not exactly. You'll see most of it is Eastern and Western. Um, and then there's this banner implementation, which is some costly project to migrate Banner to the cloud, I guess, and some additional financial aid. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. So Thursday there will be more discussion and of this, I think. Um, Now, this one is also very important to our students. These are that they range from between 2.9% at Eastern and 5.6% at Western. And again, I'm sure there'll be more discussion of the source of these, but there is background inflation happening, and so the cost of food is higher and raw materials. Now, the question I have about this is that, and this is something a few faculty have been talking about with challenges with respect to uh, food support programs like SNAP benefits under the federal program. Um, you know, there's just a lot of increase in food insecurity in the state, right? And this doesn't, in some sense, doesn't help with that problem, raising these fees in this way. So I hope people are talking about that and considering that. And if there is some attempt to control rising food insecurity in the state, hopefully our students will be able to participate in that. Um, Again, a lot of that is due to federal changes, but that's the environment things that we're kind of operating in. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, President Toro, I just talked to the chairs yesterday about this with an interesting aspect of Sodexo, at least at Central. The contract specifies that Sodexo is able to pass if there's an increase in food cost, and it doesn't actually specify what percentage triggers this. But even though we're in the first year of a 3-year contract with Sodexo, they can raise the price of the meal plan, which then gets passed through to the university because of that second bullet point you mentioned. So the housing fees and room and board are, like I said, they have said that they're not going to change in 27, but it looks like Sodexo's charge is going to change. And so that's going to have to be covered directly by the university.
Yeah.
So is this an attempt to try to defray some of that from the system's reserves?
I would imagine there's some pass through there to students, but I guess my concern is it's never wonderful for a student to face rising costs like this, and then
Yeah.
in an environment in which there's this sort of federal rug pull of certain food assistance programs.
Yeah, of course, we prefer the student, it doesn't get passed to the student, but the problem is, who's going to help cover this?
Right.
So it would be great if that's what the system office could help us do.
Yes, or any plans for relief of food insecurity in the state. My hope would be our students were part of that plan, but there's just a lot of things up in the air right now with this special session, and there's going to be a lot of need for a lot of things in the state. So, okay, and here's maybe just to end on a brighter note, because I know some of this is a little dismal, if not all of it. So the good news is enrollments are doing quite well at the CSUs as well as at CT State. Now these graphs are a little bit hard to read. This isn't necessarily how I would present the information, but essentially we're looking at weeks until the September census and comparing them from one academic year to the next. The blue, and let's just look at the left side because that's this fall. So the blue line is from 23, the yellow line is from last year, 24, and the red dashed line is from this year. And so you can see that these are FTEs for all CSUs. You can see that we've been building enrollments over time, which we've been in a lot of meetings together, and how many times have we heard that like enrollments will not be climbing, yet here they are going up. And also we haven't lost the CSUs as a whole have not lost as many as we approach the census as we have in the past. So that is good news. Like what we're doing, students find appealing at an increasing rate. So yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I just have two questions. One is this, when you say the CSUs, do you mean the 4 universities, or do you mean the five, or do you mean even, it looks like it includes Charter Oak too. So I'm just curious, these numbers,
Yeah.
8,800, is that, what's that for? Everybody?
Actually, thank you, Mike. Let me actually correct myself. So this is actually central, but actually central is close to what happens with the whole thing. Let me actually jump to the slide that is for all of them. These do not include Charter Oak.
And
So
my
this
other
is
question, just quickly, is, do you mind, because I often have to report back to the Senate with this, could you just send us these charts that you're putting up here?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, no problem at all. And thanks for that question, Mike. This dashboard is a little tricky for me to work with. So if you look at the top there, this is actually for all of them, but it is the same kind of overall message, which is that since 23, FTE enrollments have increased. Each line is higher than the other, and are sort of melt like 1 or 2 weeks out from the census is not as much as it was before. In fact, the CSUs grew right on the census date, which is a little bit of an exception from prior years. So more students enrolling, more interest in what we're doing, which is great, but a challenging environment that students might be facing. So this is what I started with earlier, which is centrals. You can see Eastern, is also above past years, but has grown. It appears by less than the other CSUs. This one is Southern. So again, you can see this year enrollment's much higher than in the past 2 years, and this one is Western. So also Western growing and having higher enrollments. So hopefully that's sort of like a bright spot for what's happening at the CSUs. I just thought I would present this information because a lot of it I hadn't seen yet until I started digging a little bit, and so I just wanted to share that with everybody. I'll stop there. Mike, I'll send the slides around to everybody, and thank you for your time. And that's what I have.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Brendan. And we are hearing, and that's sort of maybe, I don't have very thorough reports from committee meetings between last time we met and now. I think mostly just because I usually just report on things that that impact us all as a group in general. And I'm not sure that there's been that much, but I do know one consistent reporting has been that we have enrollment up in many areas, right? I do know, and I think we maybe need a little bit of an update, but I believe the slide, I pulled out a slide and I should have noted to myself what month it came from. I believe it might have been around April of this year. I think if we compare it, versus what you were just talking about, Brendan, in terms of our staffing, like while enrollments are going up, staffing has been going down. So the comparisons were with 2019, and I've asked before for like equivalent like time periods and contrast with enrollment, and maybe I'll ask again. But since 2019, in this system report from earlier this year, full-time faculty were down 9%, full-time staff down 8%, part-time faculty down 17%, part-time staff down 22%. So it'd be interesting to find out how these two things are comparing and whether we're sort of replenishing that supply commensurate with the increases in enrollment, et cetera. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I just want to add to that same excellent question and excellent point, Helena, but I just want to add to that I bet if we looked at the, I'm sure the management hires are going up. They have to be, right? Because they're hiring so many new people. So we might want to compare it with that too, since 2019. I think they've gone up way beyond whatever, they've gone up more than we've gone down, I would say. So I just thought make sure we can follow through on that as well, if that's okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Lena, could you say again what the staff number was? I got the part-time.
Full-time staff were down 8%, part-time staff down 22%. And the numbers, like the staff numbers are really large, right? Full-time staff, the number is 256 folks gone. That's the 8%. And 158 part-time staff reduced. And I will identify exactly what month I got this from, but it would have been spring of 25.
As long as you're repeating those numbers, would you give us the faculty one more time too, please?
Sure. Faculty, full-time faculty, 9%, and that's 204 positions. Part-time faculty, 17%, and that's 922 positions.
Thank you.
Sure.
And that's across the entire system?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. That breakdown for management and across the divisions too would be helpful to see that.
And that's since 2019, right?
Since 2019, yeah.
Sorry, did you say those were just positions that were cut or were not funded when they left?
It's a reduction.
Reduction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, you know what I could do? I could copy that image just so we have it in front of us. And stick it in this report. So here's the thing. I do not have a report for you that is sort of similar to the kind of report I would usually give. What I do have is a draft of a possible report to the legislature, which I have been very much dragging my feet on, waiting for new information, etc. I think for two reasons. One is that I wanted it to be really concise, and I think what I've ended up with at the moment, this draft at least, is very concise, but with extensive footnotes and lots of appendices planned. I think Blitz and I used to have this goal of like a 2-page report that we could never pull off. But I think I'm at the point right now where, we've done so many really thoughtful studies and gathered data, and we've pointed out, Brendan did this amazing thing on the sort of not return on investment, but that kind of thing, right? The way that we could view investment in higher ed. We did one in analyzing the failure of enrollment projections over the years, which I think really just speaks to the fact that the narrative coming out of the system office is simply whatever it needs to be to facilitate whatever narrative we're pushing at that moment, right? And there are issues with that. I think I did one on investment, levels of state funding in terms of real dollars. And I think we could just harken back to that, because at the end of the day, it shouldn't be our job to inform them of these details. This is all public information. And in the end, these things that don't get anywhere. So what I'm hoping for, if you'll indulge me, I don't know if this is appropriate or not. I have about a 1,500 word report prepared that I would like some sort of feedback on in terms of what we need to add or subtract. And I'd like to just kind of share that with you now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Is that fine? Okay. And just before I say that, before I forget, I think last time we talked about the possibility of a legislative special session. At the time, what legislators were saying, what everyone was saying was that if it didn't happen by November 1st, the money that was available would get swept to the pension fund, to the pension liabilities. It turns out that's not necessarily true. It's just what was expected, but it's not what's legally required. So right now, what we're actually looking at is an anticipated special session on November 12th and 13th, or at least that's what folks are kind of saying, potentially, or later in the year than we would have thought. But the need, I think, to advocate for more funding for like everything our students and their families need remains. So just letting you know that that's stuff has changed and probably will continue to change because it's a constant negotiation. Okay, so if that's cool, and thank you for saying so, I'm gonna read it with you. Yeah, so one of my hesitations was, sort of the fact that this is a lot less, thoroughly researched and analyzed, It feels very opinionated. And yet at the same time, like I've been in this position for a while and I have an opinion, and that's what I'm sharing. Unfortunately, that opinion is very critical, and it's unfortunate, but it is what I see. So, yeah, I will share that with you now, and maybe you could let me know what you think. Is that screen two? Ooh, that's a lot of stuff. Okay, we'll do it. Sharing. Okay, and you're seeing it begins with the Connecticut Constitution. Okay, great. All right, so I'll read through it. The Connecticut Constitution requires the General Assembly to maintain a system of higher education, including the University of Connecticut, which shall be dedicated to excellence in higher education. For the entirety of the existence of the Board of Regents for Higher Education in Connecticut, again, this first draft, I might want to get a little bit more polished here, but the system has been of necessity dedicated to bare survival at most. It has been in a constant state of leadership turnover, structural change, and fiscal crisis. Almost immediately after its creation in 2011, UConn exited. Oh, we don't need that word again. That's why. The system then survived the installation of 5 presidents or chancellors in its first 6 years, only one of whom, Philip Austin, had previous experience in higher education. The last of these 6, the then governor's ex-chief of staff, with no terminal degree or experience in higher ed, introduced the Students' First Plan. The Students' First Consolidation Plan had no faculty input in its creation, persisted despite vocal and sustained system-wide faculty and staff opposition, was initially dismissed as unrealistic by its accrediting body, met none of its ever-shifting projections for savings, implementation, or for success, and opened in full-blown and very public fiscal crisis while simultaneously claiming to meet NEGI Standard 7, which is institutional resources. The state legislature allocates roughly $400,000 per year to the system office, well, the BOR, that's the Board of Regents line. All other funding is in a block grant to the institutions. If the costs of 61 Woodland Street are to be justified, it can only be in virtue of their support of the institutions and the centralized advocacy at the Connecticut State Legislature and with the governor to support our existence. And yet the history of CSCU since the Board of Regents' existence has been one of shrinkage and starvation in terms of state support. There's also very little documented success and quite a lot of disruption associated with system initiatives, whether implemented or unimplemented. A lack of transparency at the system level makes it impossible for the public to assess the costs of delivery of support services. And some recent innovations in shared services imposed on the community colleges have proved so inadequate that the cost is irrelevant. The shared service structure has had to be revised. Failure to collect data that would make the success of TAP measurable for many years makes it impossible to determine the extent to which, all right. I was weather and I edited it and I can't get rid of this right now. Okay. Determine the extent to which a key benefit of a centralized system has been realized. The approach to maintaining transfer articulation pathways has recently changed, and those changes appear hopeful, but the past decade and a half have very little that can be documented clearly. Political advocacy has failed to sustain the system. In real dollars, funding for the system continues to decrease each year. In the past year, the Office of the Chancellor has been an explicit obstacle to securing funding for the system. Over the past decade and a half, however, system presidents or chancellors serving at the pleasure of the Governor's Board of Regents have failed to secure adequate funding for less explicit reasons. In truth, while the focus of the public was on Chancellor Chang's personal use of funds, what is more alarming and a more appropriate subject of public attention is the consequences of his leadership of the system. They include a failed CSCU 2030 proposal for which no faculty and staff input was solicited, the implementation of a disastrous and unethical hiring plan of well over 100 guided pathways advisors for which consequences were not only foreseeable but foreseen, and the poor implementation of the Students First plan more generally. Chang's management is only the most recent, but it's certainly not the first. He follows a parade of short-lived CSCU leaders, followed by a relatively longer tenure of Mark Ojakian. President Ojakian may have succeeded in his mission to implement Students First, and then retired of his own volition, but his legacy may be one of the most disastrous if the documented predictions of faculty and staff governance bodies across the system over many years prove true. Already, we've seen the prediction of a December 2017 FAC report is likely, as element after element of its initial structure is reversed. And that is the report that begins with that we'll basically just have a very expensive implementation and then spend the next 20 years piecing it all back together, right? A track record like this one suggests that the primary problem is not with the individuals in the role, but with the structure itself. Approaching 15 years on from its inception, the structure warrants revisiting. We are in a period of transition with interim Chancellor Meduco in the role for 1 year. He has promised to address the issue of transparency and is assembling a committee to do so. This is very hopeful. Simultaneously, there's a significant disruption at the federal level with almost every element of the status quo in question. It is a moment to take very seriously the state's commitment to a system of higher education that is dedicated to excellence and how it might best be implemented. The failures and frustrations of past years may provide some lessons. I suggest that we must ask and attempt to answer the following questions. So 3 categories. 1, and should I pause?
No, this is good. Keep going.
Okay. 1, representation. The CSU system is intended to serve the whole state of Connecticut. It is a small state, but educationally diverse, with the brunt of K-12 funding borne by the towns, and with more school systems than there are towns. 9 of the 15 voting members of the Board of Regents are appointed by one individual, the governor. No matter what the attitudes of the individuals, they represent the entity that placed them in the seat. Might they be a better way of constituting a board for a statewide system to assure that members are responsive to the needs of all corners and constituents of the state? That's the first question. 2, accountability. Local institutions ought to be accountable to the communities they serve. And yet, in a centralized structure that has been known to impose structural change that forces out institutional leaders, the reward structure is artificially skewed towards the institution serving the needs of the system rather than the other way around. Statute 185, which creates the Board of Regents, includes a charge to uphold the distinct missions of the various divisions within the system, CSUs, community college, and Charter Oak. Might there be more appropriate forms of decentralized governance that would facilitate these commitments rather than frustrate them? And then the third section, state support. Again, 9 of the 15 voting members of the board are appointed by the governor. The chancellor and their staff hold their positions at the pleasure of the board. This single individual, the governor, has oversized influence on the levels of state funding because even if state appropriations are hashed out in negotiations between governor and legislature, the governor effectively controls the parameters of a public case that could be made for that funding. In recent years, the governor's attitude has been one of simultaneous structural meddling and fiscal neglect. The neglect is evident in the example of his and his predecessors' action or inaction regarding our bond funding. Of the almost $2 billion, of the almost $500 million authorized by the legislature over a decade, only 33 million, I think that's correct, I got to double check it, 33 million, something in that range, was released by the Governor's Bonding Commission, and this only in the past few months. Meanwhile, institutions are forced to forego basic maintenance for crumbling facilities or use already thin funding from elsewhere to cover it. It is important to note that though Chancellor Chang was a clear obstacle to our funding prospects, he was not relieved of his position, got to fix that spelling, until after the legislative budget session ended. Though our so-called reserves justified the absence of additional funding this biennium, that inaccurate narrative has not been corrected publicly. The reserves do not represent a surplus of funding, but rather tell a story of underfunding more severe than initially understood. A story of past years' funding not spent on our students to compensate for the starvation we anticipated. Our financial model is to run ourselves into crisis, secure one-time funding from the legislature to patch the hole, though in reality, our process, I guess on paper, our process is to simply request funding, right? The board, there are different models of how funding is provided, and the board just requests numbers and justifies it how they justify it. In practice, our funding model has been effectively a base plus model because of restrictions at the state budget level. But the need for supplementation of our budget with one-time money year after year after year is a testament to the fact that these funding levels and the state budget's restrictions are not adequate to the task. So last question, might we ask ourselves what a system of higher education that is dedicated to excellence looks like, what it costs, and what commitments to funding such a system would constitute the dedication to excellence asserted by the state's constitution. That's it. So there's a lot of criticism and then some questions and no solutions. Brendan.
Yeah, I think it's great, Kalina. I think it's, reflects exactly what's happening in our state and with our communities. It might be worth looking across the border to Massachusetts for a contrast with their fair share amendment, which has raised over $1.8 billion for public higher education. And the gross domestic product of Massachusetts has outgrown ours. The so-called flight of millionaires never happened, even though the fair share amendment was passed. So it's not hard to see like a better model that's working better and addressing a lot of the issues you've described in that report. So I would just make that observation as well.
Thanks. Matt, and then Mark.
Yeah, thanks. Kalina, I was going to say I really like that. I think it's critical, right? But I also I don't find it to be that. I mean, the opinion is sort of like, yeah. I mean, as someone who this is my 4th year, so I kind of came in midstream when all of the student first stuff was. I really appreciate the sort of long sort of look overview that you give it, like beginning, and then also sort of like on the fact that faculty had opposed and said was going to happen does seem to be unfolding, and sort of like keeping that front and center. I really appreciate that in this. So I don't have anything to add. I just do think the tone and everything seems right on to me.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so Mark and then Jen and then Mike.
Yeah, thankfully that's really good. And just thinking, because I've been around since 2011, reading that again gave me some PTSD, I think. But yeah, I really like the way it ends with very specific comments about the governor and the bond funding in particular and so like that. The one thing that kind of struck me is your line about Chang being an obstacle to obtaining funding, and I'm just wondering if it might be worthwhile to like give a very specific example there. It just
Yeah.
seems a little bit open.
Will do. And I think there are sufficient, I mean, the media was just obsessed with this. I wish they would be more obsessed with like substantive actual issues with this. But and I think there's at least one public statement from a legislator saying that they won't put the money in his hands. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful, that last section where you're specifically explaining how the surplus is just misinterpreted, has been regularly misinterpreted, and has led to a funding crisis. I think that you stated that very well and very accurately.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I forget now. What is it? Jen, Mike?
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
Mark? Yeah.
Before I ask my question, can you remind us the full audience that you'll be sharing this with? Because it's related to my question.
Well, really, this is actually directed at the state legislators and at the higher ed committee, because it really is time to rethink, you know, how they're overseeing this. A lot has happened since 2011. So it really is the state legislatures, but remember that next month we also have our joint meeting with the board. And I have some suggestions about how we might use that big meeting, but if we, you know, depending on what we do with this now, this could also be a jumping off point for some discussion with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought you did a great job. I love the sort of pointed synopsis of everything. And my advice for editing would be to take out some of, not take, I think you can leave it. For example, the language about the guided pathways advisors, where you talk about the hiring is unethical. I think it might be stronger if you remember that even though this particular audience should know what you mean, if you were to take the word unethical out and then move a sentence right under it that describes in a really short synopsis what was unethical, because I'm not sure that everyone has like a steel trap mind the way you do. And when you reference so many things, I think that that little, even, you know, simple sentence of the unethical piece would play out well, because I think you do such a great job explaining it, but I don't know. I feel like you need that 1-2 punch. You did the one punch, you need the two. And that can come in the minor supporting detail of the thing, because unethical can sometimes come across to an audience who's feeling like as a criticism rather than focusing on what was actually unethical. So I know what you mean. And I'm not trying to be nitpicky or tell you to add more. Does that make sense?
You.
Like just and I'm happy to like give you some suggestions too as you go through, because there were a couple points where I was like, oh, I think that the context, like a little more context for somebody would be helpful for some of the things that are those big issues, because that was a huge misstep. And I don't necessarily know that your audience is going to remember it in that same way. I don't know what you guys think, but
yes. And this is one of those places where I'm like, I've got the footnote and then I've got the appendix.
Okay.
Right. Because there's two levels to that. One is just, you know, the sort of clear, you know, deception or, you know, being unwise in that way. But the other is that there is an explanation from our CFO at the time, right? And this is the unethical part for those who, because again, forget steel trap mind. I'm trying to figure out where I have that email, and it's in my file somewhere. No idea. So, but I do know that what was explained was that we were going to hire guided pathways advisors who would then persuade students to take what would on average be at least 1 credit per student. And that would raise the money to pay for their own salaries, which is insane and has zero to do with whether or not the students, in fact, should be advised to take more courses. And that was the issue. So I think you're right there that at least should be placed.
So
in
that's
there.
so interesting because that's not the unethical issue I thought you were
Exactly.
referencing. So,
Exactly.
So
There's
that's
more.
very helpful. I could give you a
There's
laundry
more.
list of them, but right,
imagine that.
Mhm.
And the testament again to, this is unfortunate that I hate referencing the advisors because they are not at fault in this. The model they were placed into is the fault. And it's, I think, a testament to them and their professionalism that they're not doing that. And they should never do that. So luckily we hired well. But anyway, but yes, thank you, Jen. I think precisely because that wasn't what you were thinking of, I'll throw that sentence in. And some other things. I would love your help. Go ahead, Mike, and then Mark, and then Lois.
Yeah, I want to echo a lot of what people have been saying. I think Matt's point about the tone is really important. I think it's really good. It's really good, Colina. Thank you for doing this. I think I do think a couple of specific examples would help, as Jen is saying. Like an example of what was right about our report about students first, just something particular that didn't go right or that went particularly wrong. And then also some mention, you make the nice point that they want excellence in higher education. And Brendan mentioned Massachusetts. I just think we also want to remind them that, you want an informed and engaged citizenry. If anything, a Democratic Congress should understand now what some of the problems are with an engaged citizenry. So, for voting and, so I just think we should push the point of why public higher ed is a public good. And I too will be glad to help you with anything if you want to work offline. But I think it's really good and important. And I think when the board sees it, it's not attacking them as much as it's attacking the structure of things. And that the stuff with the governor appointing 15 people is really crazy. So I think all the suggestions that you're making are good. I'm sorry, what?
Okay, it's 9 of the 16 of the 15, but
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Yes. Thanks. And I have that in again a footnote. So your input as to whether the footnote is adequate is helpful. For just for the record, we've gotten rid of regional presidents. We've reversed the CEO decision. We've changed the dean structure and the academic area structure. We've now put back, I believe, curriculum review at the campus level. So we're just unwinding it at the cost of a few $100 million and a lot of disruption. Go ahead, Mark.
Is that Mark M?
Yes, Mark M. Sorry.
Yeah, I too like the tone of this report, and specifically just the area of the funding mechanism, which we need one. It's we have to beg every time the legislature comes back. So we need some sort of model where there's a baseline of what CSCU is going to get. We're chronically underfunded by hundreds of millions of dollars. So that needs to be fixed. And I do see the chancellor's role, number one, as being the number one fundraiser for CSCU. They're at the top. They have the network. They have a great staff and people under them who can do everything else. But they should be making sure that this endeavor can succeed, and that means having a balanced budget. Because right now, each year, we just kind of feel like we're in jeopardy and it's unsustainable. So I think those points are really important. Yeah, the guided pathway advisors at the Connecticut state level, uh, on the positive side, I see them as our sales force. I see them as being on the front line, getting students to enroll in students. So however they got created, I see them doing a lot better job of registering students than, kind of faculty trying to be registration advisors ever could. So I just wanted to throw in that positive note on the side of the GP advisors. But thanks for the report.
Thanks. Lois, and then Brendan, is that a withdrawal of a hand or? Go ahead, Lois.
As far as the guided pathways advisors, I think you should just say that they were hired on grant money we know was going to be ending because it was pandemic grant money. And just say that. And I think on shared services, I think you have to go harder because shared services is not working. Human resources is totally dysfunctional in every single way. And I can give you pages of stuff about why and what the problems are. And I think that needs to be stated. And also the fact that when we do get money, it goes to CT State, New Britain, and they spend it whichever way they want to, and it doesn't get down. Very often it never gets down to the campuses at all. We get things like that little 6-passenger Pope-mobile we got for the maintenance open that we didn't even know we were getting, but Maduco decided that I don't know how many campuses needed one, so we got one. But we can't hire people.
Thanks, Lois. Then go ahead, Brendan.
You just, I was just going to offer in terms of alternative models to the political appointees on the board itself. The one model I'm aware of, at least in economics, of a truly independent board overseeing something is the Federal Reserve Board. Now, the governors themselves are appointed by politicians, but they're granted 6-year terms. One of whom is, the current president is trying to remove from her position, and he's finding it quite difficult. So even if you do have political appointees, if you guarantee long terms, they can end up acting in independent ways. And then the other piece of that system is that you also have sort of regional representatives that come up through the grassroots. And so we could think about the educational system in Connecticut as sources of actual educators who could participate in oversight. We seem to draw quite heavily from the business community, which, is fine, but there's a pretty clear difference between public institutions serving the public and private enterprise, private for-profit enterprise outside of education. And I think that's at least part of the problem that we're facing on a regular basis.
Thanks, Brendan. Okay. So couple of ways we can go. If we don't have suggestions for like substantive changes, additions or omissions, I'm going to clean it up a little bit. I am going to add the references and the addendum, the addenda to support all of this stuff. But if the text isn't going to be significantly changed, might we want to approve the content of this now so that I can get it to folks before the special session, and they can keep us in consideration as they move forward? Or do we can also take our time. and do this later. Thoughts? And that's just me dragging my feet and writing this morning, because that's me. Mike and then Jen.
I think it needs a motion from a member, and I'll move that we approve the substance of this report as an expected report.
Thank
I'll
you, Mike.
second that. It's John.
Thank you, John. And Jen, does
I
that
was just gonna say
contribute
the
to
same
that
thing.
discussion on that? Pardon?
I was just going to say the same thing. I think we should
Okay.
vote now. Mhm.
Cool. All right. Then I guess all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? And are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you all. Whew, got it in just in time.
Sounds like we
Thank
trust you.
All right. Okay, what is next? Let me find the agenda. Oh, is the next thing the credit card? Yeah. Okay. So the credit card policy, Lois, I may have not actually gotten real information, because this might be what you were saying to begin with. But I've at least clarified it, and then maybe we can refine some questions or ask someone to come chat with us next time. But let me see. So the understanding, Lois, is that I just kind of followed up with Lloyd. What I haven't gotten an answer for is just what the rationale is, like whether it's a security thing, because it is odd that students can use their credit cards to pay for different kinds of services on campus, but cannot use them to pay for tuition related items on campus. It's like we will handle their credit cards if it's local services, but we will not handle the credit cards if they are system services. I believe the processing fee, what I'm trying to figure out is the processing fee new. So the credit card processing fee is now 2.95% for anything that it's used for. And students can use their credit cards for tuition related item for charges, but it just has to be done online only. So you can do it on, like, right in the office online. It just has to be done online. You don't give your card to someone who works for us. So yeah, that's all I've got, which I think might be a reaffirmation of what you were saying. But I think we need a little bit, like, what else do we need to know, Lois? And what conversation do we need to have?
Why?
Just why?
Well, there needs to be some reasoning behind this. This is ridiculous.
Okay. All right, so I'm waiting for that. And I asked late, and I got part of the answer, clarification, and I did not get that why. So I'll guess we'll have to get back to that next time. I apologize, it took forever to do it. Okay, so we'll return to it. Does anyone else know whether that 2.95% is higher, lower than what existed before?
What it was before, there wasn't any before.
There wasn't any charge before.
Not as far as I know there wasn't.
Okay, because I
Wasn't.
remember
don't
there
know,
was.
but as far as I know, there wasn't.
Okay, all right. Okay, so and we have eliminated the CSU resolution on gender affirming care because it might not be coming forward. So on to the joint meeting topics. So I know that I'll have at least a brief conversation with Marty Quay. Hold on, did I say that right? I hope I pronounced it. In trying to get the pronunciation of his last name right in my head, I sometimes confuse myself.
It's Gway.
Gway. Okay, good. Got it right.
Gway.
All right. So yeah, we are going to have a conversation early next week to at least start agreeing on that agenda. And then Brendan, if you're available, maybe we can have another or however it will work. But the custom is for the FAC chairs and the board chair to agree on an agenda. I wonder if folks have thoughts. I know that my thought was to keep it sort of focused on advocacy for state funding, really. And, you know, Brendan, you brought up the Massachusetts example, hoping to get either some presentation on that from us or from some sort of like key person from Massachusetts if possible. So that would be nice to have that kind of conversation with the right sort of person. And if you know folks who might be the right sorts of people, let me know. Go ahead, Brendan.
The other thing, just to put this out there, it may be, it may not be a large enough topic, but it's certainly one that CT State and the CSUs share a common interest in, which is the PACT expansion. So, you know, CT State students, you know, who are about to finish their programs at CT State now have potential source of additional state funding to continue their study at the CSUs, as well as Charter Oak. But I literally have no idea how management is going to do that this year. And we've not, it's brand new, and I haven't heard anything about like what that rollout is going to look like. You know, so that's just an open question a lot of people are wondering about, like, are these CT State students going to miss out on this new source of funding because they just don't know that this new program is there? Like, what's the plan?
Mm-hmm. Well, that seems right for sure. And that is also an extension of the state funding. I mean, that's one of the few wins we had this past legislative session, right? So, yeah, definitely. Let's inquire about that.
Can you just real quick clarify for when I'm presenting this context with this information? So PACT was expanded to also work for the four-year institutions.
If you graduate, so if you're going from a community college to a CSU, yeah,
Okay.
it'll follow you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. And when was that? When did that happen?
This past session.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Mark.
This would be my first round of this kind of meeting. So could you tell me, will the entire board be present? And is this an opportunity for all of us to express our perspective on things from the faculty viewpoint? And how would one go about coalescing our common views on what we should bring forward to their attention?
So, I mean, that's all open right now, right? So, yes, every member of the board is invited, and you know, will attend if their schedule allows. This has been on the board calendar since the end of last year, so hopefully they will be available. And you know, the question that you asked, so those are sort of, I don't know, maybe two different things, right? Will we all be able to share our perspectives with them? Or how do we sort of coalesce on one perspective, right? And, you know, that's two different ways of potentially maybe proposing that we structure the meeting. You know, do we want room for just kind of open discussion? Do we want to present? I think the last really, we tend to do a bit of presenting and then conversation. But it is nice to have like open dialogue also. So, you know, that's something we can talk about. And we also, if we should at least meet as a group, some subset of us between now and then, to sort of get clear on that. I'm glad that we got to go through the, you know, my report draft today. So at least there is some sense of where we stand on that kind of perspective. So that's helpful. And I think we all know where we stand on state support. So yeah, I mean, do you have suggestions about how it should be structured? Should there be an element of we're presenting to them or asking them even to present to us some sort of vision? Do we just want open dialogue on a general topic? And do we want, is there information that we would want to request from the system office to clarify? For example, I'm pretty sure that I want a nice comparison of those numbers of reductions in staff with increases in enrollment over a comparable time period. I think that'll be helpful for any discussion we have. So yeah, suggestions. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add to Mark's question or answer to Mark's question. I think it's really good to have an agenda of items. I think this is what we've done in the past, right? We've agreed on certain things we want to say, and then there's still a possibility to have open conversation about that. But I think it's hard to bring up issues that aren't on the agenda because it's only a meeting for so long. So I think we want to meet ahead of time, agree on the things we want to talk about, and agree on what we want them to provide us. I would also ask them to provide the numbers for the increase in management positions during that time too. And you know, so we want them to provide some stuff. And then I think we should talk about that and probably figure that we're not going to get to all of those things, but you know, generally it's worked out that different people speak up at different times on certain issues. And yeah, so yeah, what's frustrating, Mark, particularly is when not everybody, when a lot of them don't show up. But at least the chair is always there. And I hope Marty, I think he's a little bit aware of all the problems that that this system office has had in the past and caused. And I think we might be able to make some headway. But thanks.
Mark Jackson?
Yeah, thanks. So that's kind of I'm just thinking about the name of this committee being the Faculty Advisory Committee to the Board of Regents. And how, you know, as you know, Mike just said, we generally only meet with the Board of Regents very specific times with a very narrow window. And it is true. I mean, there's only so much time that we can talk. And in my experience, we've never had the whole board. The last time, you know, Marty, I thought was very approachable. I think we had a good conversation, but we are extremely limited in what we can talk about in this brief period of time. And as we know, it's really like we have to jump through so many hoops to even get the privilege of this conversation, which is, I don't know, it's just like, that makes it really hard to advise. To be an advisory committee when no one's asking for advice. So,
yes.
However you want to say that.
I feel like that's all we say every year, right?
It's true. It's true. And for all the committees of the board, you know, as Blitz used to point out, we are the only committee that's never asked whether we have a report out, right? And even these twice yearly actual meetings with the board really only began with Chang. Before it was just a report delivered to the board and not even necessarily read. So, you know, there's some interaction. And I should say, you know, I was thinking, Mark Mlinsky, that when you were mentioning before about our interactions, you know, we also used to have various events throughout the year that actually just allowed for natural interaction. So we'd had the FAC conference for many years. That would be every year in the spring, and it was quite an event. And sometimes we would invite legislators or, you know, whomever. Very useful, also very labor intensive, and our funding for it got yanked. I think in retribution, nobody who did it is still here, so whatever. Some years ago, that year, the unions banded together and patched our funding so we could do it anyway via Zoom, but we haven't really come back from that. There was a shared governance award that we proposed and participated in, just so that there was an opportunity to really engage in like meaningful conversation with board members about what constitutes great shared governance, et cetera. And that continued for a couple of years. I think what ended up happening was that in the middle of that, one of our members who was serving on that committee was silenced by a member of the system office for something he said in that committee, which seemed like such a deep violation of shared governance. That was the last time we ever really continued with that, and it just kind of fell by the wayside. I'm not sure anybody in the system office even remembers that existed, because the provost is gone now, etc. So those were some natural, venues for us to have useful conversation, and those really have gone away. And there's questions. I mean, I think a lot of us wonder. I mean, look at the nature of my report. My report is really like, should this exist? So there's an element of that. Like we've kind of tried many different approaches and never quite felt that any of them was particularly effective. But there's also in the meantime, we could have a conversation about whether there are other things that we want to make sure that we do together. Yeah, so I think it was Mike and then Mark.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think we should pick up on Mark's point, and Mark Jackson's point, and say, and put on our agenda, our list that we want to talk about is having better communication and better, having the opportunity to advise more and better. Again, we can only hope that, if they're the same as everybody in the past, then that won't happen. But if they're different, it might. And so I think it's smart to ask for that. And I think Marty does seem to be a little bit more open to dialogue and maybe open to the idea that, yes, this committee could provide some help given the disaster of Students First.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mark M.
Yeah, I'd like to continue to explore the ways that we can continue to advise and to build influence. And because this is about relationship building, so that when we talk, we're listened to. I think that maybe networking events may be informal, just getting together offline, casual conversations can be helpful. Maybe having one board member, maybe once a month or something, for maybe 15 minutes at the top of the hour or something, come and visit with us for an exchange, just so that we continue to be on the radar. And it's not just kind of a once a semester or once a year event, but I think we need to be in their minds a little bit more. And those were all great in the past. How can we revive some of those things? Thanks.
Cool. All right. So I'm gotcha, Mark. Thank you, Jackson. So at the moment, we definitely need to talk about how we could better coordinate advocacy, especially in this moment where the narrative that we are publicly beholden to, right, about our funding puts us at the bottom of a very long and very urgent list of folks who desperately need state funding, right? So I see we want to talk about the state funding issue and how we can better coordinate, try to discuss a shared understanding of where we are, vision perhaps. And a subset of that would be figuring out how we're implementing ACT. That might require that we reach beyond the regions to the system office and get an official answer from someone who's actually doing implementation. So I see that as maybe part one. And, you know, we have, you know what, in the past, the other thing has been that though they have 3-hour blocks, you know, set up for board meetings, they have given us an hour. We have not had the conversation with them yet about what we will do, but we have to advocate for a little bit more than an hour for sure. But the second thing would be maybe a dialogue about what kinds of shared projects we want to engage in to facilitate our advisory capacity, right? Whether it is an item on the agenda, you know, a shared, a joint event, various different things like that. And I do think if anybody has the sort of capacity for it, maybe we should do something in person at the end of the semester. I think it would be in January. I'm not going to be mentally here before the semester begins, and then it'll hit. But I think maybe in December, it's also a busy time, but it might be worthwhile just considering that we do something where we are in physical proximity to each other, because that makes a huge difference. But yes, sorry, back to the joint meeting. Two major topics: state funding, both advocacy and implementation in terms of the PAC thing. And then the nature of the advisory position and what sorts of things we want to do to enhance that position. Yeah? Okay. And then I don't know that any of us will have solutions available. So I think that for the advisory stuff, that would just be a dialogue. Perhaps we devote more time to state funding than we do to the advisory bit. Okay. Yes, Mike.
So I'm just unclear right now. When do we know when that meeting is supposed to be?
Yeah,
And
November 14th.
Okay, so I think we should try to meet one more time before then.
Okay.
If not this way, somehow to put the list of items to be talked about together, to put together.
Yes.
And so whether we could do it informally or formally in a meeting, one or the other, frankly, I wouldn't mind having another meeting that just was that simple-ish
Full
task.
public meeting, not subcommittee.
Yeah, and for an hour instead of 3,
Okay.
you know, and just, you know, pound out a list of things we want to talk about. But I'm also okay if we don't do that, but I just wanted to suggest that.
No, I mean, that sounds great. You know, the more we can put into preparing for this. So, you know, let's see, I can send out, you know, a poll to see if it's even possible. Somewhere, let's say it would be the 24th or the 31st would be most likely. And I can try to get some of the information that we would want from the system office in advance of that. If enough of us to constitute a quorum manage to say yes to that meeting, then we'll post it and that'll be that. If not, it'll be an informal subcommittee. How's that sound? Okay. All righty. We're going places. Yay. All right. Anything else before we move off of that to old new business? All right, so old or new business then. Anything we need to know? Any gossip? Go ahead, Mike.
No gossip, but I would just point out that all our new business is old business issues. Everything that's coming down is just a repetition of stuff we've had to deal with for years.
Fun. Joys. Anything else? All right. Who wants to make the motion?
I'll move. My mic is open.
Woo! All right, let's move then. I don't think we need a second. Bye all. I'll stop recording.